Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I bid to the panels, Dr. Zainab binti Abdul Rahman and Dr. Rashidah binti Ilyas. I am Abdul Waffi bin Muhammad Rapeia from PISMP TESOL 2 June 2017 intake. Today I'm going to present my research, which is the perception of SerenTaB Year 5 pupils towards the implementation of video games during English classes in improving spelling skill. And my supervisor is Dr. Rosliza binti Abdul Aziz. Moving on to the background of the study, games can be used as an effective tool to enhance students' learning a new language because the use of games breaks up the monotony of instructions, offer a change in routine and atmosphere, and give students opportunities to practice English skills in a safe environment. According to Square 2011, a good educational game is vital for a student to remain engaged, excited, interact, problem solve, and learn simultaneously. The study of learners' spelling errors provides an opportunity to understand and facilitate in the learners' spelling difficulties, according to Alzud and Kabilan in 2013. Next is the statement of problem. Malaysian learners are lacking of motivation to use English in their daily life, which has resulted them to not mastering English spelling well. Students were facing a lot of difficulties in writing English language due to lack of vocabulary, poor spelling, L1 interference, and a poor understanding of grammatical structure. Spelling errors occur when there are incongruent phonemes between the pupil's first language and English language. These problems are also happen in SK Sungai Tua Baharu, SerenTaB, which is the school for the respondents of this research. Next is the purpose of the study. The first one is to find out the perception of SerenTaB Year 5 pupils on how video games help in improving their spelling of English words. Second one is to prove that the usage of ICT such as video games can give benefits to pupils in terms of education. Moving on to the research objective, the first one is to find out the perception of SerenTaB Year 5 pupils towards the implementation of video games during English classes. The second one is to find out the perception of SerenTaB Year 5 pupils towards the implementation of video games during English classes in improving their spelling skill. The third one is to find out the difference between the perception of boys and girls towards the implementation of video games during English classes in improving their spelling skill. And the fourth one is to find out the correlation between pupils' perception towards the implementation of video games during English classes and improvisation of spelling skill. Next is the research questions. The first one is, what is the perception of SerenTaB Year 5 pupils towards the implementation of video games during English classes? Second one is, what is the perception of SerenTaB Year 5 pupils towards implementation of video games during English classes in improving their spelling skill? And the third one is there any difference between boys and girls' perception towards the implementation of video games during English classes in improving their spelling skill? And the last one is there any correlation between pupils' perception towards implementation of video games during English classes and improvisation of spelling skill? Next, moving on to the significance of the research. The first one is to raise awareness on the importance to teach spelling. According to Trayman in 2018, learning to spell is important for writing and reading, but how spelling should be taught is a controversial topic. The next significance of the research is to highlight the benefits of video games for education. Games in the classroom are no longer played just for fun, but instead seen as learning tools that can engage pupils' interest and immerse them in subject knowledge, as said by Ruggiero in 2013. Next is the related past researches. According to Gosku and Kaganaga in 2016, Using games creates an environment in which there is fun and satisfaction besides high motivation for learning a language. According to Al-Shawi in 2016, playing games give an opportunity for students to have fun as well as to learn English. And according to Septian in 2019, there is relation between online game practices and understanding of English. Next, moving on to the research design. For this research, the researcher used survey as the research design. Survey is an appropriate method of collecting data if the researcher wishes to know about the opinions, attitudes, and perceptions of respondents, according to Phillips in 2012. Next is the population and sample. This research applies the purposive sampling technique. For the population, it is Year 5 pupils of SerenTaB, which are 290 in total. As for the sample, it is 152 Year 5 pupils of SerenTaB, as suggested by Craigie and Morgan table. Next, moving on to the instruments used for data collection. This research used the questionnaire as the instrument, which is adapted from Septian in 2019. This questionnaire consists of 3 sections. The first one is section A, which is demographic, 2 questions. Section B, implementation of video games during English classes, 15 questions. Section C, spelling skill, 15 questions. For the pilot study of the questionnaire, the Cronbach alpha is 0.931. Next, moving on to the research procedures. The first one is identifying an issue. Second one is writing and presenting research proposal. The third one is analyzing and stating the background of the study. The fourth one is developing the research objective and questions, choosing the target population and sample, getting approval, preliminary study or pilot study, establishing the validity and reliability of the instruments, collecting and analyzing the data, writing the report, and last but not least is presenting the report. Next is the data collection procedures. The first one is getting permission from the administrators of SK Sungai Tua Baharu, SerenTaB, to do the survey, and then distributing the questionnaire to Year 5 pupils via WhatsApp, and it taking about 2 weeks to get the targeted amount of respondents, which is 152. Next is the data analysis procedures. The first one is reliability test, which is the researcher wanted to know the Cronbach alpha. Second one is descriptive analysis, which is to look for the mean and standard deviation. And then normality test by using the skewness and kurtosis test. And then the inferential analysis, where the researcher wanted to know the independent sample t-test and peer correlation test. Next is the conceptual framework. Pupils' perception, implementation of video games during English classes, improvement in spelling skill. So the pupils' perception is the main idea that the researcher wanted to know on the implementation of video games during English classes and whether it improved the pupils' spelling skill. Next, moving on to the data findings. For RQ1 and RQ2, the researcher used a descriptive analysis to see the mean and standard deviation. And for RQ3 and RQ4, the researcher used inferential analysis, which is using the t-test and also the Pearson correlation. Next is the discussions. For RQ1, SerenTaB Year 5 pupils have positive perception on the implementation of video games during English classes. The mean is 4.19. For RQ2, SerenTaB Year 5 pupils have positive perception on the implementation of video games during English classes. in improving spelling skill, and the mean is 4.11. For RQ3, there is no significant difference between the perception of boys and girls towards the implementation of video games during English classes in improving spelling skill. The significant value is 0.274. And for RQ4, there is a significant correlation between pupils' perception towards the implementation of video games during English classes in improving spelling skill. For the Pearson correlation, the value is 1. Next is the conclusions. The first one is implementation of video games during English classes does help in improving pupils' spelling skill. Next one is all pupils love video games. And then video games offer good advantages to pupils in terms of educational purposes. Next one is recommendations. The first one is teachers should implement video games in the teaching and learning session. Second one is teachers should vary the teaching methods. The third one is increase the usage of ICT for educational purposes. And then further researches should be done on the effects of video games on other skills. Last but not least is the implications. The first one is pupils can improve spelling skill through the implementation of video games. Teachers become aware of the benefits of implementing video games in classes. IPG Campus Dato' Razali Ismail can help the trainee teachers to boost their competencies in advanced ICT skill. Next is Ministry of Education, MOE, can formulate a framework to enhance ICT usage in Malaysia education system. And last but not least is Ministry of Education, MOE, can seriously consider greater support for supplying ICT devices and providing better internet bandwidth into schools. So that's all from me. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.